Hey, what's up, everybody? As people are kind of trickling in here, we'll give it about a minute here, then we'll kind of dive into the stuff. Give me just a heads up where you guys are from, where you guys are hailing from today. Would love to see where you guys are tuning in from in the chat. So let me know. Sweet, tons of people pouring in. Yeah, let us know where you guys are coming from. We'll get the ball rolling here in a second. Buffalo, welcome. Salt Lake City, Pennsylvania. Hell yeah. Cool. Kosovo. Sweet. International group today. I love it. All right. Well, we're
Love
going
it.
to get going. Okay. Unwracked is a live conversation series from Bridge Athletic. Bridge provides coaching tools to world renowned organizations like the Philadelphia Eagles, Naval Special Warfare, and Westside Barbell. They provide those very same tools for coaches like me and you to use in our communities to deepen the training experience. Unwracked is a free educational series Bridge puts on to break down the training systems, methods, and philosophies that drive performance at the highest level. Each episode takes you inside a specific approach, how it's built, how it's applied, and how it evolves under real world conditions. Today's guest has spent more than a decade as a performance coach in collegiate, professional, and high school settings. He even started a school, a literal 6th to 12th grade institution called South Florida Prep. John Garrish's commitment to community, excellence, and belief in our next generation of student athletes, sticks out to me as some of the underlying reasons why I think it's like so important to have him on this episode on Rack today. So, John, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Thanks, Coop, and thanks, Bridge. Thanks to all the attendees. It's really cool to see a bunch of people here, especially from all over the globe. So I appreciate that introduction. It feels like you covered everything, at least from a professional standpoint. I'm blessed to be working. I've worked at the same. I guess there'll be an interesting spin on things and how we speak about the two different schools. But I guess my traditional private school that I've worked at for a dozen years now, blessed to be there. Incredible people. Obviously, anytime you're at a place for 12 years, I don't mean to sound like James Franklin or anything like that, but when you're at a place for 12 years, it's an incredible thing. So I'm honored and blessed to be there. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I founded this new operation, which is South Florida Prep, which stemmed from some things that I was doing from a nonprofit standpoint. South Florida Speed School is a weekly speed session that we do for members of the community that's completely free in honor of my sister. So I guess if there's one thing that maybe I would like to include in there after that professional introduction is just my personal introduction, that a lot of the things that I do are in honor of my sister, who passed away 13 years ago now. So
Got it.
that includes the nonprofit being founded. That includes some of those free weekly sessions. And that also includes at least the inspiration or the little push to get South Florida Prep started and to be able to work with some students in a very unique capacity. So
No, I love that, man, and that's where I'd love to kind of kick off and start today is just really getting an understanding of like how someone even gets to the point of starting a school. You're the only guy I know who's ever done that, and very curious to kind of hear how it relates to your sister. And so, yeah, just would love to hear more about that, man.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. And again, so the nonprofit started, and some of those free weekly sessions had started, and it's for everybody. So
Mhm.
North Broward is a tremendous and prestigious, some would say affluent private school. It's a high ticket for tuition, very much worth it. But so a school like that, that's where we often would host these sessions. All right, and a lot of families from neighboring communities would come and attend, and I would connect with many of the students. And I heard a pretty common thing, and the last thing I want anybody to think that I'm doing is like knocking the public schools. I'm a product of South Florida public schools. The fact of the matter is, like, not everybody's going to fit in one place, right? So a lot of families were mentioning some concerns in the traditional public school that they were in, and many of those students oftentimes wanted to apply for a school like North Broward Prep, which is the school that I work at, and want to find a place in a school like that, a prestigious school. Um, but oftentimes the means are tough, right? So in order to afford something like that, many families it's a challenge. So what you're seeing in the state of Florida, without getting too deep into it, is yes, there are families that are moving from the public schools. Oftentimes, private schools, yes, they're booming, but in many times, families, again, times it's tough, right? So a lot of families are going in the direction of virtual schooling or homeschooling. You have some things that are available in Florida that are especially enticing to student athletes and their families, namely with school choice, you're able to almost select any school that you can play for, but attend a non-traditional school or a home education program, which we basically offer both of those. So when I started to see a lot of families go homeschool, and a lot of kids, to be honest with you, are just sitting on at home on their computer. Not in our program. I'm saying that's kind of the direction things are going. And I thought, we're kind of there's a gap there as well, right? So I feel like
Mm-hmm.
there's a gap in all settings, and there's always going to be, even at South Florida Prep, we're trying to fill them at all times. That's what we're trying to do is better ourselves. But oftentimes, yes, maybe families are right in that for a particular student, the public school wasn't the answer. And yes, maybe that family, it would be beyond their means to afford a very, many of the private schools in the area. But in certain instances, maybe being at home is as bad, if not worse. And I'm not saying in
Mm-hmm.
terms of home environment, but I just don't think that sitting at home on your computer or sitting at home on your phone is the answer. And yes, many of those kids in particular are student athletes, so they will be outside, they will be getting physical activity. But I really wanted to just be able to provide them a place where they can come. The curriculum is online, and so where they can do their schoolwork in a safe and structured environment. And yes, I
Mm-hmm.
can certainly put on my strength coach hat when the time comes and be a big part of our school day. But safe and structured is the name of South Florida Prep. Like that's really what we want to be able to provide for those students. So again,
Yeah.
seeing those gaps, seeing kind of the direction that families were moving, I felt like we might have something here in order to, fill those gaps. And year one, we started with 4 students. Year two, we're at about 40. And I just
So
opened
cool.
applications, and that number has already been hit in new applications. So we're
That's
excited
dope.
about the trend and the direction that it's going. I think a lot of that is I always keep the things that I've learned in strength and conditioning is like you can always be better, right? Like just
Mm-hmm.
events like this, like you can always be better. So there have been some things that have been productive. There's been some things that have been successful at South Florida Prep, but there's always a blind spot that if we don't look deep enough and we don't look far enough, at one point or another, it's going to come up. So constantly trying to better ourselves, constantly trying to provide the best possible value and the most value to our students is our goal. And thankfully, it's been a very positive experience to this point. Thankful for the support of North Broward as well, that has been willing to kind of see me through getting this off the ground, and still be a member of the community and
So cool.
a member of the staff. And it's been a blessing to be able to see kind of both coincide. It's been awesome.
It's so cool, man. Yeah, and I appreciate that intel because I think it's important to kind of frame around like, your role in the community and how strength and conditioning is an extension of that, in a lot of ways. So I guess like, you know, what how did you get into strength and conditioning kind of in the first place? I know you have an athletic background that I'm sure, plays a role in it, but talk me through that too.
Yeah, so I always knew I was going to be a coach. Like that was,
Hmm.
there was no doubt about it, no debate to it. I thought I was going to be a coach on a football field. Like
Hmm.
that was my sport growing up. I did end up being a track athlete in college, funny enough, at one point.
Hmm.
That won't get too into it, but had one too many injuries and picked
Yeah,
up track midway through my college experience. But I always knew I wanted to be a football coach. I'm still kind of a football minded guy. I think anybody that, any conversations that we have, I might instantly just pull on like a football analogy or something like that. But
sure.
um, always was on a football field, always thought I wanted to be a football coach, be it offensive coordinator, head coach, college level, whatever it may be. And pretty early on in my high school career, we got some coaches that implemented some unique training strategies that caught my interest and piqued my interest. And then I really got along with my strength coach in high school. I started out college at the Air Force Academy. Matt
Mhm.
McGettigan is, in my opinion, one of the best strength coaches in the world, certainly in the country, certainly that I've been around. Um, and when you have something like that, and this is something that I speak with, the comparison between high school and college strength and conditioning is high school, you do make an immense impact, but it's not the only place that you make impact. Because if
Mhm.
it weren't for guys like Matt McGettigan, I don't know where my life would be, because the stakes are higher at an Air Force Academy, where you're
Mhm.
coming from a 17 or 18-year-old kid leaving home and just being dropped in this new space. But the same goes really across all colleges and universities. You go, the change is the most drastic one of the most drastic changes an individual will ever undergo in life. And usually that source of support and structure is the strength and conditioning coach, right? So
Mhm.
I started to see, yes, I heard all the time on recruiting visits, you're going to spend the most time with the strength and conditioning coach, and this is going to be your best friend. And I still use some of those things when I'm talking to families.
Yeah.
But I realized, like, really quickly, like, that was a person I could go to. That was a person I wanted to learn from. And that was a person in many of his positive traits, many of his traits in general, I wanted to emulate. And the same went for many of my strength coaches. I don't want to name everybody because I fear I'll miss somebody, but I had a number of strength and conditioning coaches at the college level with my path. So after Air Force, one of the injuries happened. I went to Wagner College and had some great strength coaches there. And then in my graduate studies, I had a fifth year of eligibility in track. That was when football
Mhm.
was done in track. And I had multiple strength coaches there, Frank Wintrick, Chris Soroka, that I was able to learn from, that emulated those same things. So all of these strength coaches, Brandon Beach at Wagner, they had you couldn't be any more different, in my opinion, besides like being in a weight room. You couldn't be any more different from a training strategy standpoint. But when you talk about just like, just people of value and people
Mhm.
that are there to support their student athletes, I was like, this is what I want to do. I saw, no knock, and I'm not going to knock any coaches, but you go up
Yeah.
to the football offices and these guys are like, their head is spinning, they're recruiting. I can only imagine now with transfer portal and NIL, head is
Mhm.
spinning, just pulling their hair out, and seemed like they were always stressed out. And again, that's not necessarily a knock on them. I know that some people want to pursue that path. That's not a discouragement from doing so. But I knew pretty quickly, like, I wanted to be in this life that was, working with student athletes on a, daily basis all year around, and
Mhm.
provide support in ways that happen beyond the football field. So that's not cliche. I think also most of the strength coaches that are listening know it's not, because we're probably all in this profession for that reason. So um,
Yeah.
that was it in a nutshell, man. And then the high school thing kind of came about surprisingly. I thought I wanted to be college, 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 as I
Mhm.
think many do when they're coming up in the profession. And I wanted to be coaching in college, and I wanted to be in South Florida. So you're very limited. Obviously, you have just a few universities that
Yeah.
have full-time strength coaches down here. Then consider making a living that you could live in South Florida. There was very few. And I got a call from North Broward Prep over a dozen years ago, talking about, I guess, no, over 11 years ago, nearly a dozen years ago, um, asking me what I knew about North Broward. And I said, man, I grew up in a house that I could throw a rock and hit North Broward. Did
Yeah.
not attend the school, but I knew right where it was. And, again, 12 years now, like, I knew that this was the age. I knew this was who I wanted to work with, even if it
Yeah.
wasn't so in the first few days. Like, it probably took 6 months, and I was like, because at first I was, you might be looking at college jobs, see what's
Mhm.
opening. After 6 months, I was like, I'm here. Like, I don't
Yeah.
going
This is the place
anywhere.
to
And
be.
again, it wasn't until a decade later that I was like, let's build something else. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
On not necessarily meaning separate. I think there's a lot of ways that we align and coincide, and it's been a really cool experience.
I love that, man. Yeah, and I guess like so the theme of this episode and just to triangulate everyone in terms of like where we're at right now and where we're going over the next few months of Unracked is this is episode one in a three-part series for long-term athletic development. We did some surveying. This was kind of the most sought after activity or
Cool.
topic and figuring out like what that really means at the high school, collegiate, and professional level is kind of where we're at. And so the focus of today is obviously being on that high school element. Like I want to start by just defining the terms here, right? Long-term athletic development, like what does that mean to you, having seen so many classes through their entire time. Let's start there and just kind of dive into the general macro perspective here.
Sure. Yeah. As strength coaches, we usually use like cooking analogies, right? I feel like
Hmm.
many people do. That's easy to lean on. We're not microwaving, we're slow roasting, things like that. When I think of long-term athletic development, it's even longer than that, right?
Yeah.
It's farming and growing the vegetables, right? It's
Hmm.
tending to and unfortunately one day butchering the animals, and that's not the students, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so when you talk about cooking an amazing plate, it's not just about, okay, oftentimes for us, um, we don't have, sometimes we can control a lot of those things. Number one, probably with the exception of one or two athletes that we might coach in our career, the students aren't our literal children, right? So we don't have the
Hmm.
responsibility of their genetics, even though we can't change that anyway.
Hmm.
But there's so much that goes on, obviously, at home and in those first few years, right? And that's kind of, again, that early accumulation of what your ingredients are going to be, right?
Hmm.
And then it is taking that time, and it is, again, butchering the meat, and it is slicing the vegetables, and it is preparing it in a way that you want to, that, again, it takes into account those, like, that big picture. And that's the big thing for me in long-term athletic development. Like, if you ask me, I realize it's not a true definition of long-term athletic development, but if you told me the
Right.
first word or words that come to mind when you say long-term athletic development, I'm going to say big picture, because
Hmm.
that is the most important thing for me when I'm thinking about our student athletes, not just in terms of stressing the things that are truly important in the big picture, but also understanding that there is a big picture. There are more people generally than just one that gives their hand into it. And there are things that happen along the way, could be injuries, could be stressors in life, could be stressors in school, that are all going to add to that pot, so to speak. And you still have to prepare the plate in the best way you can. And
Hmm.
I've always, like, since working at North Broward, I don't know if it's arguable. I'll stand here and say it is the best private school in South Florida. It is
Hmm.
a college preparatory environment, right?
Yep.
So our goal is to prepare our students for their college experience. For me, as a strength and conditioning coach, I identify my responsibility and my role to prepare our students for their college experience. Some of them might be college athletes. Some of them
Hmm.
might go on and play at Notre Dame. Some
Hmm.
of them might go on and play at Kaiser University. Some of them might go on and play at University of North Texas. Some
Yep.
of them might just go to Florida State University. And I want them, they're going to get really riled up and probably tailgate for a game on Saturday. They're not playing sports there. Games at 3:30, you're going to start tailgating at 12. Do you enjoy training enough, and do you care about your fitness and wellness enough to wake up at 9 and go to the student gym? And did you pick something from your time at North Broward to keep you going on your, again, long term? Yes, now we're no
Hmm.
longer maybe talking about athletic development,
Yep.
but your lifelong fitness
Development.
journey.
Yeah.
Is that something that now is important to you? So when you talk about big picture, that's like the number one seed that I want to sow first, is the importance of fitness and wellness for the life and lifelong. And then it's, again, kind of working your way backward design. Okay, our college student athletes, how do I get that kid prepared as best I can for Notre Dame? Might look different, right? But in a
Hmm.
weight room, you can't really differentiate every single person. I saw a funny, like, teaching meme. I won't revisit it, but it was basically saying, like, you're going to be in a classroom with a whole bunch of people that have, um, you know, whatever it means, like, regardless, like, you're going to have students with some different learning strategies. You're going to have
Yep.
future doctors. You're going to have students that are bringing stuff with them from home. The same thing goes in the weight room, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to have, especially in most high schools across the states, you're going to have everybody from potential Division 1 athletes to students that are only on the team because they think the Division 1 athletes are cool, or are only on the team because they want to impress that girl or that boy that's in their
Yeah.
math class.
It's
And
a wild room when you get all of them in there at once, man. I
correct,
think it could not be more diverse. I mean, because when you get to that college level, they're kind of all here to do this, and we're probably the best guys from wherever they're from.
absolutely, yeah.
So,
So when you're working in a high school, it's really the toughest challenge is differentiating for everybody. So you probably can. So then you go back to the common denominator across the room and really hammer that and figure out what the simple things are that would better everybody, make it an enjoyable experience, get them better, and then prepare them for, like, to me, if we prepare all of our students for, I'm just picking on Notre Dame as a positive, because
Hmm.
that was where one of our students had went. But if we prepare everybody to go play sports at Notre Dame and think about what we want to check off in that preparation strategy, we're probably going to be in a good place on Friday nights or Tuesday afternoons when they play games. And it's probably
Hmm.
going to provide a lot of value to everybody. If
Yeah.
it's, again, that slow roast, that long term type of process, when you think about that and you work backward of, okay, I want this kid to squat, hinge, pull. Well,
Hmm.
they're likely going to be in a good spot. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how I like to kind of cast the widest net possible in the room and find
Hmm.
the denominator. And then you could obviously get creative when a little bit more clarity is there. It's just like
Hmm.
multi-sport and single sport participation. Let's participate in multiple sports, and then, like, let the sport kind of choose you. You know what I mean? That's the recruiting process. Is we think we can do so much, and yes, we can better ourselves to become a more recruitable student athlete, but at the end of the day, your college is going to choose you, unless you're one of the very select few that has the number of offers and can really pick which school
Yeah.
they want for $1 million, whatever it may be. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, your sport chooses you, your position chooses you based on measurables, and your school, your college, generally chooses you based on if you're a recruitable person for them or not. And then
Hmm.
again, still training up to the best of our abilities there. But that's kind of how I like to be able to work with the entire room.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned kind of building back from what we want point B to be the end state,
Sure.
right when they kind of graduate and such. So what sounds better to start at that point B and dive a little deeper into what we want to see when our seniors graduate? Or is it better for us to kind of start with the freshmen and like, you have the blankest slate you're gonna have in 4 years down the barrel with them. So
And
what makes the most sense?
that sounds good, man. But
Hmm.
one of the things that I've really learned is, like, when I was working at Rutgers before I had taken the North Broward
Hmm.
job as a graduate intern of sorts.
Yeah.
And my time there was the summer, and working there in the summer, like, this was all in the same time of, like, first interview, second interview with North Broward,
Yep.
and I'm like, the high school level could be pretty cool. And you have all these basically recently graduated 12th graders, you know what I mean? Like freshmen in college that had just graduated, maybe 18, some of them 17 years old. And you saw one of two things for many of those student athletes. And, those two things, like, one, the individual had, like, never seen a weight room before or had
Hmm.
stayed away from it. Or
Yep.
two, that student athlete had been in a training environment where they just hit it so hard. They had injuries that 40-year-old, retired athletes shouldn't be having from
Hmm.
overtraining or whatever it may be. And that's not a knock on, like there
No,
were
I know
also
what you mean.
obviously the select few that were tremendously trained and tremendously well prepared. But that's not going to be everybody. So I'm thinking, okay, well, we had this, 4-week opportunity to train up the freshmen, the true freshmen that were coming in, to prepare them for the more elite level of training that the rest of the
Hmm.
team was on. Man, if we're doing this in 4 weeks, imagine what we could do in 4 years. And completely still am aligned with that. But then you realize
Yeah.
when you have ninth graders, it's like, wait, what have you been doing? You know what I mean? And granted,
A
most
whole
of
lot of
them aren't
nothing
coming
sometimes.
in because they bench press 5 days a week, and that's not what it's going to be. But they've probably never seen a weight room. Which,
Yep.
even if you ask the coaches at Rutgers, somebody beat up or somebody that's never seen a weight room, give me the clean slate. You know what I mean? Unless they're
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
really don't want to be there. Obviously, that's a different conversation. But um, you're not going to have ninth graders that are, like, beat up from time under a bar,
Life.
reps
Yeah.
under a
Yeah.
bar. Rarely. I mean, I guess it's
Yeah.
possible. But there are still some habits that's like, dang, I don't even know where to start. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it takes
Hmm.
time, and you got to kind of chip away and break down and build them back up. So
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds great to say like you get them as 14-year-old freshmen, but there's still a lot of work ahead. And then I realize, eighth, seventh, sixth, it continues getting a little bit better. I don't know, maybe I'll be just strictly youth one day, but
Yeah.
when you have that opportunity, like that's a big thing with South Florida Prep too. Is I have and with North Broward, you'll have some middle schoolers that'll come and work with the high schoolers, right? And then we'll
Hmm. Hmm.
differentiate and we'll do what we need to do for the younger kids there. For South Florida Prep, I have 6th through 12th graders. It's a pretty clear divide on the two training groups, and I have them training at separate times. That now it's like, oh man, we got 7 years of this, and I it's going to sound like I'm like a mad scientist strength coach that's like only designing this program so I could like control everything. That's not the case.
Yeah.
But it is nice to be able to control, like, okay, if we push training back 30 minutes, I don't have to worry about a teacher calling and being mad, understandably so, that a student is 30 minutes late.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that are in control. So yeah, man, if you have the opportunity to take a clean slate, I'm taking a clean slate any day of the week. But I still think that backward design is the necessary way to look at it.
Hmm.
Looking
Hmm.
at, again, okay, if we know we want to be able to squat well, we want to be able to hinge well, we want to be able to do at least perform the Olympic movements. Now, I have different theories on the Olympic movements. I've also progressed in my thoughts on that. Whereas, maybe if you asked me 5 years ago, we were hardly
Hmm.
doing any, if any, um, just derivatives, I suppose.
Yeah.
Until it came to a point where they were preparing for college, and I didn't want to send a kid to a college weight room having never done a clean
Yep.
or any
Yeah,
Olympic.
because they're gonna like they're 90% sure they're gonna see some version of it, right?
Correct.
When they get to
Yep.
that level. So it's like to have them unprepared for that, I think is a that's a negative,
Yeah.
negative thing. So yeah,
Agreed.
totally hear you on that.
Agreed. But then once I started implementing them, I was like, and working with Joey at FAU, I had an opportunity to do that through
Hmm.
COVID, and he's just expert level there, man. So,
Hmm.
like seeing some of the benefits and seeing what was happening in that weight room, I was like, maybe I am missing the mark here. And it still is a challenge. It still isn't a challenge. And I hate to say this because I know a lot of viewers are probably like, how do I implement this into my traditional school day? It still
Hmm.
is a challenge at a place like North Broward, and not a place like North Broward, but where there's so many uncontrollables
Yeah.
and it's kind of a voluntary environment. That's really how the model of the school and athletic department has it. So that's how we roll. Versus, again, at South Florida Prep, I know I'm going to see kids 5 days a week. And if we want to train 5 days a week, we could get under a bar.
Yeah.
And we could slow roast things and take as much time as we want. um, so some of those ideas, I guess, sound good in theory, but in practice are a challenge. So
Hmm.
um, I could understand that. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of it's speaking with college strength coaches and drawing on my own experience at that level and seeing, okay,
Hmm.
well, this is probably something that more than likely they're going to see. How can we prepare them for that and make sure their
Hmm.
bodies are ready to go? And again, it's there's another balance of thinking, okay, so long term, right? And so long
Hmm.
term and thinking, like I'm not saying rushing and getting numbers and, chasing numbers, so to speak, but okay, we're not worried about numbers. And most college trained coaches will even say they're not concerned with numbers as much, but we're not worried about numbers, not worried about numbers. But at the end of the day, it's like some of those, I'm not saying strength numbers, like most
Hmm.
college coaches, not strength coaches, but like scouts of sorts or recruiting
Yep.
department, whatever position coaches, most of them aren't calling and asking what a kid's back squatting. Sometimes they
No.
will just to know strength numbers, but they want to know like speed values. They definitely want it, like those measurables matter. So if you're a
Hmm.
toothpick, and yeah, that's probably an excessive term, but if you're
No, I know
somebody
what you
that's
mean.
like not straining under a bar and not progressing from a strength standpoint, it's probably proving itself on Fridays, right? Or it's probably proving itself when you get
Yep.
on a line and you have to run a 40
Yeah.
for a combine or a
Yeah.
coach that's in town, something like that.
Yeah, when it
So
matters most, right? Like, because that's
exactly.
ultimately what those scouts are looking at. They're not looking at your Instagram lifting account. They're looking at your highlight tape on Huddle.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, there's still like, we still have to account for that. We still have to perform well on those days. And,
Hmm.
you have to think of that in terms of like just waves of training and being smart about when to really press and when to scale back, especially if like in an ideal scenario, my preference and my suggestion to all families is play multiple sports and
Hmm.
play them for the most part year long and, take a few breaks here and there. But then to be honest, as chaotic as that sounds, when you flip the perspective and don't think of those kids as much as like in season, oh, off season's here, we got to push. Oh, they're just in season year long, and it's
Hmm.
just little waves of okay, this is an important competition period, postseason, playoff time here in the state of Florida for high school fall sports. We'll scale back some, but it's if you when you think of all year like in season, but you flip your perspective of on in season of we can get strong and we can move well and we can perform well. That's there's great value in that.
Yeah, and maybe some of the details here where where the gold really is. I mean, you mentioned kind of like you like the strength matters don't matter. Like you can have a kid benching 405 that is not good at football. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And such, they obviously have to show that they can do the skills on the field. But like I want to know kind of okay, you've got your year one guys. What are they kind of learning and what are the specific variations they're developing so that at year four, they've got the transfer of the training to the field. And obviously they're a different athlete, different body, different I know to I guess give a little more context here, like there's a really cool graph that I found of MLB players, NHL players, NBA, NFL, and it was like height weight
sure.
and just like you see the density. You know what I mean? We're like, hey, 80% of the guys are here, and yeah, you've got some people on the fringe, really tall, really short, wherever they might be. But the vast majority of dudes are here.
Right there.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is like the vast majority of dudes need to be here in order to get to that next level? And where are we starting from, that freshman year?
Yeah. So I've said it numerous times: squat and hinge,
Yep. Yep.
bilateral, unilateral. Right? We haven't. So in a program that's existed for we're coming up at the end of the first semester, so three
Hmm.
semesters. Um, and hopefully I'll be able to put a bow on what I'm saying here.
Hmm.
We back squatted maybe 6 of those weeks, and those weeks were last year. All right.
Yep.
Reason why I say that is back squat is one of our it's certainly not an end movement, right? Because all of them are means to something else anyway, right?
Of
But
course. Yeah.
back squatting to me is not something that we're going to do yearly. And
Hmm.
it is going to be something that, however, I think it's an exercise of great importance. That's where I
Hmm.
stand on back squatting.
Hmm.
Have we done front squatting a little bit more? Yes. And the reason why
Hmm.
we're utilizing more front squatting is because number one, the freedom and the safety to fail in front squatting to me is a little bit
Yep.
better.
Yep.
Secondly, the student's perspective, they could get a little soft in front squat, and I would rather coach put more weight on the bar than coach shit moments, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and my
yeah.
and my reason for saying that, okay, is and like our clean variations, we're going to work towards a hang power clean. Like that's
Yeah.
ultimately, I'm kind of giving you just a picture of like what our South
Yeah.
Florida prep days are. So, or what our program is there. We spend I look at the Olympic movements as still learning movements. There
Hmm.
will be a block of training where we're loading a crap ton of weight on the bar, at least within reason, for how they perform and what their technique is. But it is a learning movement for us for most of them. And most of those kids there, it's a little bit, again, I'm giving you ideas versus maybe practice, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we have one senior young lady, one junior young man, and then the rest are 10th grade and younger. So again, in terms of like not having to rush the process, we're not rushing the process. I think of it as we work our way up and we progress to these movements. And then it's not a start over, but it's almost like a cyclical revisit of that progression. Right. And the
Hmm.
reason why I say that is a ninth grader is certainly learning, like, or a sixth grader. Ninth grader is easy because we'll just say back squat. Like a ninth
Hmm.
grader is going to have to show that they can counterbalance squat and they can med ball hug squat and they can goblet squat and then they can front squat. And then maybe once we get to back squatting as a group, they will back squat. That process we could take as long as they need to learn those movements. At the same time, okay, we work our way up, say 8-week program, work our way
Hmm.
up to heavy load on a front squat movement. I would say more so like a 12-week block. And then
Hmm.
everybody is going to revisit that technical progression. Not they're now they're not going to spend 3 sessions counterbalance squatting and med
Yeah.
ball hug squatting, but there is always going to be a time in our program to revisit those more fine technical points on the regression of those primary lifts or those lifts that we kind of prioritize in the program. Like I
Hmm.
said, back squatting, bench pressing, sure, hang power clean. Like those would be the three that we're really looking at. How can we master these? Um, so again, although ninth graders are going to go through that strategy again, all of our movement our technical progressions are always going to happen. We are always going to revisit them on a every 3 month basis or so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess clarifying question there, like
Please.
it sounds like you have some of the, the variations that like transfer to the field and that you like to do based on the reality of the weight room and such.
Sure.
Now, in the context of this technical block, right, where you're working on the regressions and that's something they kind of revisit, like
Mhm.
what is the intent that you would want to see? Then boom, you're back to like, let's just use front squat, right? Like, so you've taken some time off to like refine elements of technique. I assume obviously taking some weight off the bar to do
Yeah.
that. What do you see when you come back to like, okay, now we're thinking about load again?
It's very much like a deload and
Hmm.
rev back up in intensity. Like that's basically how we're surfing those waves is like
Yep.
build our way up, take everything back and like let's just and again, so not only is it giving the body a break, not only
Hmm.
does it give us an opportunity to maybe introduce other movements, maybe
Hmm.
some of our ancillary or secondary movements, but it does give us the opportunity to correct some of those more fine details. And again, when you have somebody for 7 years, that's like you have so many opportunities to revisit it instead of just
Hmm.
saying, yeah. And obviously, every time they're under a bar is an opportunity for technical work. That's the
Of
number
course.
one, like it has to
Yeah.
be. But at the
Hmm.
same time, that is necessary of just, okay, well, I've always said like my big thing, especially speed wise, but I'd say also it does bear its head in the weight room. Um, I'm candid in saying, like, I'm not embarrassed to say, like, oftentimes my weakness is my verbal communication. Not saying I like don't want to say something or like I want to shy away from it, but oftentimes I get my tongue twisted and I use
Hmm.
a word that I'm like, dang, I wish I used a different word because I read in this cue book that I should use that cue, so on and so
Yep.
forth. But that's where a lot of like cues really came into play and made me
Hmm.
really like think about some of these technical progressions. Again, it really presents itself out on the track and out on the field.
Yeah.
Like now you're talking about things that are moving like this.
Yep.
Whereas what happens in the weight room is a little more simple, but still does become again. I think if there's a weakness that I have, and I'm trying to continue working on it, but it is that verbal communication ability and the usage of words. So I use the like statement all the time, like I tell kids out on the track, I want you to make this look how you think I want it to look, right? So I
Hmm.
want them to present something the way that I'm hoping they're hearing what my words are saying. When
Hmm.
you revisit things in the weight room, there's an opportunity to do that in a more simplified way with the regressed movements. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, I've also tried to teach, a ninth grader how to do an RDL, which is
Forget about it. Yeah.
like just, oh my fucking God.
Yeah. Forget about
So
it.
I hear you. Like the reality of it, really does come down to how you can make this thing relatable to the kids from a queuing perspective, right? Like what
Absolutely.
have they heard and how can they think about iterating on it? So like let's dive into the queuing thing because I do think that that's so important, especially for this age range, assuming that at college and pro levels they've kind of done, 80% of the stuff you're going to show them to a lesser or greater extent and can make the shape happen one way or
Sure.
another. So talk me through like what are you thinking about when queuing, these kids?
Um, it's I like to do things like, again, to kind of revisit what happens out on the track or out on the field. I
Yeah.
utilize a lot of like tactile cueing strategies
Hmm.
of like, if anybody's seen any of my speed stuff, like it'll be different hand positions, it'll be different like placement of the hands, like hands on waist, hands on shoulders, like things like that. And the reason for that is because I have the ability to say, I want you to feel something from your hands with what your
Hmm.
hips are doing, right? So I want you to feel your hips aligned, your hips through whatever cueing. I didn't really like think about an example
Sure.
here, so forgive me
That's
on it.
okay. Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
but yeah, and it also just depends from those movements in the weight room. It kind of just depends on who the kid is and what it
Hmm.
what movement it is. Like our traditional back squatting, and there's some things, to be honest, that have um I don't want to say changed, but definitely like altered maybe some of my coaching and cueing strategies of like how forced do we want this like technical model to be. You know what I mean? Meaning
Yeah.
like not everybody we this has been a conversation for years on end in our profession of like no two people are going to squat the same, right? So
Yep.
without like a very specific example, I guess, of like looking at that kid and having a thought of what he or she needs or what might be helpful for them or what's important, like um, it's a little bit challenging, but again, the bringing in those implements, like changing the implements, is part of that tactile cueing, right? So if you're going med
Yeah.
ball, you're emphasizing posture upright. If you're going like a squat to a box, you're emphasizing a sit back kind of power related squat
Hmm. I
strategy.
mean,
But
it sounds like you're, when a kid's gonna have different femur lengths, like between kids, but also that kid might grow 6 inches in the
yeah,
next, 6 months, and
yeah,
we have a completely different body we're working with. So how can you're leveraging these drills from what it sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you're leveraging these drills to like reinforce a specific feeling in an area
yeah.
that is unique to their sequencing as
Yes,
you go. So
yeah.
how are you like, I guess, getting a really good idea of when to put X drill? Like, how are you assessing, that so you know what intervention to make to get the adaptation that you're looking for?
Yeah, so you mean in terms of like advancing to the next, or meaning like which to use, I guess.
I guess a little bit of both because obviously there's an art to this where it's like, hey,
Yeah,
you ran track, you played football, you've been a coach for a while, like you just kind of intuitively figure things out,
sure.
right? But also like, you know, I think probably both of those points that you're
Yeah.
making.
And you can see you bring up a good point because I'm big on like, again, I don't want to get in the weeds of like what happens on the track. That would probably be for a whole nother
Sure.
conversation. But
Yeah.
I love, man, I love just like diving into hip rotation and internal rotation, external rotation, right? So when
Love
you
it.
see, like, you see some of these, you see some of the best athletes, like some of the most twitchy athletes, generally
Hmm.
have a great degree of internal rotation, whether through their
Yes.
movements or whether they present themselves pigeon toed or not. We're not going to get into that, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
things like there's a lot of, so when I see an athlete move like that, the answer might not be a mini band around their knees and telling them to emphasize pushing their knees out. because again, you want them to be able to continue to utilize their movement strategy that is best. So some athletes, and that's kind of what I was getting at with like, there's some ways that I've changed my thought process on some of those movement patterns,
Mm-hmm.
whereas there might be an athlete utilizing some internal rotation that might look like valgus, and obviously you have to be very cautious when you're considering that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not as like so fearful as I thought. Or we've been doing landmine squats for the last 8 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
just like a traditional landmine squat, like at their chest, kind of like a landmine front squat.
Yeah, sure.
Um, and some of our students will naturally have kind of a little more inclined lean and be up on their toes a little bit more. And oftentimes the kids are like, "Get your heels down, coach." And I'm like, I know it
It's
sounds
okay.
weird, but it's okay in this instance. Like I kind of like what they're
Yeah.
doing. So again, there is an art to it. I do think there's specific things that you'll see in individuals, but generally, because then there's more to unpack, right? I'm thinking of some of our kids that, yeah, their posture becomes an issue, but what about their hip and thoracic range and mobility and ability
Mm-hmm.
to move? Oftentimes there's a lot of more fine corrections that need to happen there, whether it be thoracic extension.
Yeah.
They're just having a tough time. Again, those kids that are like, growing at a crazy rate, like those kids are going to really struggle anyway. So you just want to be
Yeah.
cautious with those kids and, still
Yeah.
continue training, but at the same time, not rushing the process.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I feel like at least where I was, it was difficult to get a lot of in-season training where I was actually coaching it. A lot of the kids took like a weight room class, right? Where
Sure.
they'd go just follow the program I wrote. But, you know, have a kid presenting entirely new problems after growing a foot over the season,
Oh,
and it's just like everything's gonna probably feel pretty different for you. So we're back at 101, and I pray to God that you use this height appropriately to just, muscle it out a little bit. Cool. I love that. And now I guess like what one important element of especially with the young kids is like the culture side of this, right? Because I think, from what you've been talking about in the weight room and some of the X's and O's of that stuff, like you're really trying to foster like excellence in the basics such that you have this transfer of training to the field, to the track, wherever, whatever sport they might be doing.
yep.
Um, but there's the Z axis here, right? Of culture, getting the buy-in and so on and so forth. So I want to know, like, because obviously you've played sports at all these different levels and coached sports at all these different levels. Like, what are the unique elements of high school that we need to really focus on?
Um, Great question. And one of my favorite things about working with high school students,
Yeah.
and I'll lean on my experience at North Broward, especially.
Yep.
I think most strength and conditioning coaches are, especially at the high school level, can walk into any classroom across the
Hmm.
campus and they're going to, again, I know I'm kind of cast like this is an umbrella statement. They're going to walk into that classroom and just about everybody in that room is going to respect the strength coach, not just
Hmm.
because they've worked with them. Probably have most strength and conditioning coaches, man, woman, old, young,
Hmm.
different builds, whatever. They have a persona and a personality and a charisma to them
Yeah.
that every campus I've walked on, I've never seen like kids run away from the strength coach, right? Even
Yeah.
ones that don't necessarily work with the strength coach. So I think there's a comfort in that as strength and conditioning coaches to know that we already have that respect. And I know that there still needs to be like a laying of ground of making sure
Yeah.
that that respect happens. But again, just like I said, just in terms of like take away everything else, just on paper, like this person oftentimes is going to be respected by everybody. So to me, that always took care of like the football program. I never had to
Hmm.
worry about if the football program was going to come in and work because I knew how to talk to them and I knew how to work with them, right?
Hmm.
Same thing goes if you give me a track athlete, especially a multi-sport track athlete, I could talk to them about this, that, and the third, right? And I know every coach in here can do that. The
Hmm.
things that I encourage high school strength and conditioning coaches to do is to get that, like, I don't want to say next tier of kids because it sounds like you're like knocking them to a level that is below. But
Yeah.
what I found at North Broward, when I started to prioritize some of the individuals that didn't get as much emphasis or attention under the previous coach, although it was a part-time thing before. That's not a knock on him, but
Hmm.
or that they've had at other schools. Oftentimes, those kids, like, to be honest with you, the girls. I found in our strength and conditioning program at North Broward, when we prioritized the girls' training, everything got better because the
Mm.
girls knew they had a space to come. They knew how to, they saw the value in the training, and they there was buy-in there, and there was real when they saw, wait a second, Coach Garrish is making the football team wait an hour so that we can train. That got all
Yeah.
the buy-in that I could possibly ask for. So, and then the same goes for like the others, like, and this was sort of, I and a lot of these things that I've learned along the way have come from kids or come from just like unique environmental things. I took over the track and field program at North Broward, maybe at the midway point of my career there. So, 6 or 7 years. I hope no kids are watching this. 7 or 8 years ago,
Yeah.
um, when I was took over that program, it
Yeah.
was much more important to like that recruitment on campus was so important. And again, I saw the importance in the weight room because I knew it was going to add value everywhere else. I wanted to
Hmm.
work with as many students as possible. So I was just trying to get everybody in there that I could. Then it really presented itself with track and field. Now it was, hey, who's in this science class that, I see a kid with some high calves and, looks like he's ready to go on a track. Why hasn't he come out to the track? And, just kind of visit with them. But and obviously I'm not going to tell a strength coach that doesn't have a whole lot of time to begin with that you have to visit every class. But there's
Of
strategies to
course.
just get as many kids there as possible, and good things are going to happen. Obviously I know that
Absolutely.
there's a lot, and especially when we were at like our peak with numbers, we started to add some tremendous assistants and staff, but for the most part at the beginning it was kind of just me. So you can do it. Just get
Yeah.
creative with your training strategy, get as many kids in there as possible, and I
Yeah.
truly believe good things are going to happen. And then, like, those other things that, yeah, they create huge challenges, but again, just, okay, there's a few things that we want to revisit technically. Can a high level high school program landmine squat and that be their premier lower body movement? I think they can. You know what I mean? Like, you can load
Yeah.
that movement up and it's a pretty safe movement where they can drop the bar. It's going to put them in a pretty good position technically. Like, if you need to scale back the intensity or scale back the progress of the movements to meet the needs of the whole, and you get more kids in there, it's just going to continue building, and everybody's going to want to be there, and it's going to kind of feel like FOMO for the kids that aren't there. So that would be the main thing from a culture standpoint. That was when I saw the biggest difference. When you have draw on what makes high school so great, and that's school spirit, that's friends, that's, when you have when people are at a high school football game and, um, the girls soccer team is sitting up with the boys basketball team in the stands, and you walk by the sideline and they're shouting, strength and conditioning coach, I'll just use my name, Coach Garris, like that, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's something I want to be a part of. You know what I mean? When
Hmm.
you have kids going home and saying like how much they enjoyed their time in the weight room, like, when you win over a household, you win over a school, especially in a school like, high school. Like, that's just what makes
Yeah.
high school so amazing, is the culture and the community. So, like, utilizing those things to be a strength, I think, is the number one thing that I would say. And again,
Yeah.
then it's other things, like, for me, who am I to say what should matter to the school down the street culture wise, right? Obviously
Hmm.
there's certain things, doing things the right way. Like, when we talk about being high level people, that's a different
Hmm.
story. But, in terms of like, I don't make the kids turn the logos facing up. Some other coach might, and that might be something that's just an important like point for them. And that's a different cultural thing that might matter. And again, I'm not to say, okay, you got to clap 3 times on my whistle. That's a different culture for different places. It depends what you
Yeah.
like to do, right? But when you talk about like real culture, climate, environment, and bringing value to a high school campus, I think all of it is in just like casting this wide net and inviting as many students to participate as possible and make it as enjoyable as an environment as possible. And again, keeping them
Hmm.
safe, secure, and good things are going to happen.
Love that, man. I mean, yeah, it sounds like a little bit like you're, got to be the mayor a little bit,
To a
like
degree.
especially when you really, work with a lot of different programs, a lot of different personality types. It seems like you're making a lot of impact, even if it's through something small, like you're talking about going to a class and saying hi, right? Showing up to the events, because obviously, yeah, you're the strength coach, which means you're in the gym. You're not necessarily like a sport coach. Like you probably don't have to go to that game every
Yeah.
time, right? But being there, being present, and really like fostering this community element sounds like, my takeaway, and maybe even the biggest takeaway today, man, is just that like that's probably what's going to get your program to where it needs to be.
And definitely, and it does kind of put a bow on the other programs. Like with Speed
Hmm.
School, we've grown from Speed School is my Sunday sessions that are
Yep.
free. That's separate from South Florida Prep. So the Speed School sessions
Yeah.
on Sundays grew from we started right during COVID, so I had to have like multiple groups of like 3 or 4 kids, and like that was our way of providing free training through COVID. And then when we
Cool.
came out of it and the restrictions were drawn back, we maybe had 30, but like you keep that same idea and keep just like grow in ways and like meet the right people that'll bring more people. Now we're averaging over 120 at those sessions. Again,
Hmm.
just like South Florida Prep, it's you start with 4, but you have the right 4 and you pour into them the right way. And again, this is now getting outside the weight room to almost like a business CEO strategy of like building a
Hmm.
school and bringing students in. But that's made me a better professional. That's made me, I think, a better person. Just a person with networking is just keeping that mindset of like, you know, prioritizing those that maybe hadn't been prioritized in the past,
Love
and
that.
knowing that there's a certain level of comfort of like I pour into these kids and I look them in the eye and I know how they feel about me, meaning like those football kids in the instance. Like if I told them they're going to train at 10 p.m., they're going to train at 10 p.m. Their
Hmm.
coach is going to support it. Like they're going to be there. But the
Yeah.
other kids, they probably won't stay till 10 p.m. So let's find a way to like make it happen for them. And again, the same goes in the other walks of life. If you want to grow something, and you want a real culture, I think more personality, more people from diverse
Hmm.
backgrounds is really important,
Yeah.
especially in our environment. It's different from a Power Five football team. That's going to be a different idea,
Oh
but
yeah.
that's where I see the most growth in each of those important parts of my life is really meeting the needs of everybody as best we can, identifying the denominators and finding a way to reach everybody. And that's a big message for all of those programs.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. Well, I want to dip into some Q&A here because I feel like we covered a ton, and people
Sure.
have been writing in questions here. So first one I want to go through here is walk me through the student who had the most dramatic transformation, and what did you see that others missed?
Oh man.
It's a
All
good
right.
question.
That's an amazing question. I had okay at North Broward Prep maybe 6 years ago.
Yep.
I had a young man walk into the weight room, like school clothes on, private school, polo, khakis, walk into the weight room and like look around. He looks so lost. And I was like getting ready to start a group. I think it was an all girls group. Again, it was right after school. So that was kind of how we tried to organize
Yeah.
it. And I could tell he was like really, um, seemed self-conscious, like just seemed insecure in the environment a little bit.
Yeah.
And I like went up and I have a pretty playful personality, especially if I just meet a kid. Like I'm gonna just joke with them. Like that's gonna be
Yeah.
my connection point. So I'm joking with him. And he said, like, you you guys like work out here? And like I thought he was kidding, but he wasn't. I was laughing and I was like, yeah, man, like what yeah, what else are we gonna do here? And he was like,
Yeah.
well, and he looked like he was basically finding ways to ask like could he join us without like coming out and saying
Being direct. Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
exactly. And
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, man, well, we've got a group in an hour. He said his mom's coming to pick him up. I said, well, if you want to maybe just like warm up with the girls and you could stay with this group, I'm sure they'll be okay with it. Again, he was just a young middle school kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be okay with
So
it.
awesome. Yeah.
Um, and listen, like we did, I think, hops in place, like just like very basic, like pogo hops in place. And I saw the way that this kid's feet interacted with the ground, and I was like, dude, like you're running track in the spring. And he was like, I don't like that was literally what he sounded like. And I was like, oh man. And he was an eighth grader at the time. And I was like, I promise you, if you do track, actually, maybe he was a seventh grader at that time. I promise you, if you do track, you'll go to states and triple jump in middle school. And he was like, nah, I don't believe you. I don't even know what that is,
Yeah.
um, that year. So all that to say, he warmed up with us. Obviously, he seemed very like nervous in there.
Yeah.
Um, I'll say the like big picture, and I don't think he ever missed a workout after that day, like ever.
That's so
His
badass. Yeah.
his transformation personally to being like the most confident, secure person. He's a student at the University of Florida now, going to be immensely successful and wealthy, and he deserves it all. Like
Yeah.
and he went on to go to the state championship that year in track. So
That's
like one of
awesome.
those things when you have like a strength coach's or performance coach's eye athletically, I saw that again. He was just doing a pogo hop that like it looked like he was just attacking the ground. It was awesome,
Yeah.
and
Just
I
some
knew
innate thing, right? That you probably didn't even
exactly,
know was like cool or
exactly.
really valuable on a
Yep.
on a
And
triple
he was
jump.
on a dang pogo. Like it just so seeing
Yeah.
that, like that was just an eye for it. And I knew kind of what was going to happen there. He's not competing at Florida. He's not 6'2", and he wasn't interested really in competing in college, but he had a
Hmm.
very successful and exciting middle and high school track career. And
Yeah.
he trained with us every day. I would hire him as a coach tomorrow if he ever wanted to come back and do that.
Beautiful.
And he
Yeah.
was one of our best movers. If anybody follows me on social media, you've seen the kid. Like you would know. Like I pretty much would post a story or something with him every day because just he became such a goofball. I think maybe he always was, but it just didn't really come out of him yet. And then, but
Yeah.
also like when he got under a bar, man, like there was nobody more intense than that kid. So he was just so playful and fun to be around. But when he
Sick.
got under a bar, like, and when he got on the track, man, he was as intense could be. And I don't want to like pick on him, but like the first day of track practice wasn't very good either, nor was really the first season. I remember like one of
Yeah.
his early track events, he was long jumping, he wasn't triple jumping yet, and he got too nervous, like he wasn't going to jump. He literally sat on the long jump runway. And eventually the official was like, you're out of time. Somebody else needs to come up. And then again, just show the success. And that's a perfect example of like one of those kids that I meant. Like get kids like that in your program. And
Yeah.
even if it doesn't feel like, okay, I'm preparing this kid to go play at Florida State or I'm preparing this kid to play at Miami because it's unlikely to happen. Like I wouldn't that coaching him is probably the highlight of my coaching career, and I don't think probably
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
So when you
I
have
mean, that's
opportunities
so
like that,
cool.
you can do that here, man.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that because, that to me is like a kid that is like a true blank slate that's just like eager and like just
Exactly.
willing to attack anything, that you throw at him is so it's such a wonderful experience. And I think when so much of the attention gets placed on, like your D1 guys, right? And your starters and all that stuff from, the sport coaches and all that stuff. And I do think, like to your point, like give attention where it is not being placed.
Yeah.
As a strength coach, you're able to flip that script and, you know, when those guys see a dude like this come in, like that's like a glue guy, that's a culture guy. And
Oh,
sometimes that's like the most important thing for them to see is that like results happened. And you might even
yeah,
get more buy-in from those guys that are ultimately like deciding victories on the field.
yeah, dude.
Um,
Say it better.
so I love it, dude. That's super cool. Next question. During weight training sessions, and this looks like a X's and O's type thing here. What
Okay.
tempo do you emphasize with high school students? Eccentric phase included in the workouts? Like how are you thinking about tempo? Let's start there.
Yeah, I'd say more so from I wish I could answer this with an extremely scientific answer. It comes into play more technically, like when we're going a counterbalance squat 3, 2, 1 on the way down, and that would be on my whistle, so I could see
Mhm.
everything, and then I'll also give them the freedom to move on their own, and hopefully be able to watch everybody's reps. But I'll be candid with you that there's not much tempo um, prioritization or emphasis when we're training. It's just in control. Like I'll just be
Mhm.
as clear as that. That's
Yeah, love it.
and maybe in our more simple movements, I'll emphasize that if we're training together. But if we're under a barbell, it's just move and control. The only exception would maybe be something that's maybe a little more hypertrophy related. Like for
Yeah.
instance, we're doing a towel grip inverted rows right now
Hmm.
that I'm having them hold a designated time at the bar, control down
Hmm.
at a designated time at the bar, and then holding at the bottom at a designated
Yeah.
time at the bar.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So I guess let me throw you a curveball here. Would you
Oh,
change your answer if you were talking college? And where they're obviously handling higher loads there.
probably. I
Hmm.
hope the next question won't be like what my strategy would be, but I
Yeah.
think probably because I'll say that's not to say that that'll never have a place in our program because I do think it's important.
Hmm.
I've seen benefit in my own training in previous times, like when I was an athlete and we were utilizing some different eccentrics and whatnot. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, there's definitely a place for it. I'm not an opponent to it. It's just it hasn't been our big priority to this
Very
point.
well. Excellent. Love that. Next question. How are you managing overtraining with your multi-sport athletes, or is that not a huge concern?
I would not a huge concern isn't the word,
Okay.
but I don't think that there has been a time that I've had concern that our volume nor intensities are really become, your intensities will really become an issue if there's a prolonged period with higher intensities, in my opinion. So even if we work up to a 3 RM or we're working in a 90% range, whatever it may be, the volume is obviously low on that day, and it's not going to be
Yep.
something that we're going to repeat for multiple weeks. So for me, I think there's like in that same breath of what we were talking about of like scaling back every few weeks and really like my general training, we're gonna train 3 and then we're gonna have a deload worked in that's gonna be getting some performance measures anyway. Definitely
Hmm.
a jumping movement doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a front squat max or something like that
Yeah.
but there's going to be some values that we're and data that we're collecting at that point. So I feel pretty safe in saying that that's not a huge concern with our methods. And the reason why I feel that way is because of those deloads worked in addition to not overdoing um, volume at any given point and treating it again like it's in season almost
Hmm.
all year round. Right.
Yeah.
So there will be periods where we hit it a little bit harder. Maybe it's summer for football guys, even though they're getting
Yeah.
started back on the field, and you got to be cautious there too. But um, and then on a case by case basis, like our kids that are in the playoffs right now, they're very well scaled back compared to some of our kids that either they're getting going into their off season or are spring sport athletes that are still continuing to move and again, these are like day by day adjustments that could happen or week by week adjustments depending on who it is and depending really on which spot. North Broward, it's a little bit tougher, but also at the same time, they're training usually as teams. South
Yeah.
Florida Prep, all different sports, all different athletes. But again, I know all of them. I could call any of their parents. Their parents are
Yeah.
generally texting me how their practice went last night anyway. So there's manipulations that can happen there. But aside from that, if we kind of keep it at like not rushing things and treating everything almost like it's in season, I found again in our space, I'm not too concerned with that. Now, based on field work, can I control what a kid is doing, from 4 to 5 before they go to practice and 7:30 to 8:30 after they go to practice, and try to link up with these other trainers and commend them for their efforts, but at the same time, maybe doing a little bit much. That's a conversation for each individual. I feel like,
Yeah.
there's some kids, to be honest with you, especially if I know who the coach is or the private trainer that they're working with, I'm encouraging them, like, get some extra work. Not
Yeah.
necessarily weight room related, but field related. Maybe if this is a period like we don't get a whole lot of time with South Florida Prep right now to get out on the field. Okay, well, I know that coach does a lot of really good work on the field. Can you get with them a
Hmm.
couple days a week? So it's able to, as long as I understand what they're doing on a daily, weekly basis,
Hmm.
way easier said than done. Um,
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of concern there, but again, there's still need to, um, take care of them, so to speak, and make sure that you're not overwhelming them.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think I've run into a few of my athletes in particular out here who they're going and working with an additional sport coach, but their sessions were like pretty intense, and so were ours.
Yeah,
And it is kind of like it feels like you're working really hard, but when you're sleeping 5 hours a night and like having to skip breakfast because the window for you to get into school is pretty narrow when you're getting up at 5 and driving an hour both ways to go work with this guy. Like, yeah, so I like what you're saying, really about that individual basis. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Like, most kids don't have an overtraining problem. And I don't think they're necessarily like strong enough to have an overtraining problem unless it is just like so much field work that they're doing that like it's just like, hey, you ran 2 marathons this week at soccer practice and soccer tournaments and like played 100 games. Like, yeah, you need to like go take a break.
yeah,
And it's different for every sport, but yeah, no, I think that's really good intel on that.
yeah. And the unfortunate thing is, obviously, overtraining could lead to burnout, injury.
Mm-hmm.
But before those things happen, performance improvements are limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could see certain things, and I might see a kid get frustrated because their vertical jump improved, you know, 4 months in a row, and then 2 months in a row it went back down,
Brick wall.
and it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? What have we done different? Yeah, you could point the finger and say, Coach, we're not doing this anymore in here, but what else is going on? You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think there's some performance measures potentially. Obviously, like I'm not gonna say we utilize anything crazy CNS wise, but you're gonna
Yeah.
start to see some things. You're gonna start to see some drowsiness, things like that. Kids that are a little bit less excited to train, or some of those
Yep.
performance movements or measures that aren't progressing at the rate that maybe the rest of the class or group or
Mm-hmm.
team is. And that's definitely could be a sign that something's going on there. And then, yeah, you're exactly right. If somebody's got 3 crazy head against the wall sessions a day,
Yeah.
props to you because you're busting your butt. But we got
Yeah.
to think about this a little bit better.
Yeah, heard. And so last question for today, and I think it plays nicely into the one that was just asked. The overwhelming amount of supplements out there, how do you navigate supplementation? And I think I'm going to broaden this question out to just like probably like some nutrition in general, you know what I mean, with this population, and such. So go for it.
Man. All right. So I always assume the position of that is not my expert subject matter, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest.
Yep.
In terms of supplementation, I don't discuss it with students.
Yep.
If a conversation comes up that somebody accuses a kid of cheating because they take creatine, that's a good opportunity to express that, like, it's not what you think it is, right?
It's yeah, it's not trend blown, man. We're
Exactly.
good. Yeah.
Um, any other simple ones like protein intake? I'll encourage students a protein supplement might be necessary, or I'm always going to stress food first. There's other ways to be able to um, bring in those nutrients. And then
Yeah.
from a nutrition standpoint, just that, like, there's conversations that can be had, and that's a regular basis of just choosing this over that, right? And just kind of like that old book, whatever this or that. I don't remember what the nutrition book was, but
Hmm.
of most kids know that they should have grilled or baked chicken instead of fried chicken. Most kids know that fish is leaner than pork. And, I don't want to get
Yeah. Yep.
statements like that, but most kids know those simple things, and they might not know what the benefits of a lean protein versus, they might not know all of those things, but generally speaking, they know that they shouldn't be eating French fries. These kids come with bags of Takis every single day, and I tell them how not
Awesome that
good,
Red 40
how
is.
ill-advised it is for them, right?
Yeah.
They know, so it's more so leading them to making those decisions, and
Yeah.
oftentimes conversations about performance, it kind of comes back to that. And again, that's something like in my everyday life, communication in general has been something that I've had to improve on, and get better at. And, personal relationships, friendships, working with colleagues and sport coaches, and working with the kids of like, sometimes I know I need to say something and I need to just go ahead and say it. And the same goes for some of these things of just like making smart decisions and knowing what could be out there for them in a positive way of like, hey, you're doing all of these things and doing all the
Hmm.
right things in the weight room, on the field. You're even tracking your sleep now. And then you're showing up to school, stopping at the corner store on the way with a huge bag of Takis and an Arizona iced tea. Like,
Yeah.
not again, another old analogy. Would you put, regular fuel in a Lamborghini? Probably not. Well,
Probably not.
you're trying to train that way. And again, sometimes kids need to hear that. We've heard it how many times, but at the same time, maybe kids haven't. So, uh,
Yeah.
just stressing those things, just getting out of your body what you put into it. And
Hmm.
have there been a couple individuals that their parents have asked me to like really sit with them and stress like what can be eaten at different times of the day? Yes, but I'm not like writing meal plans and,
Yeah. Not a nutritionist.
safe in my
Like,
lane, so to speak.
yeah, 100%, man. And I think like that's so important too, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily go to the athletic trainer to ask strength and conditioning stuff,
Sure.
just like they wouldn't come to you to ask how to tape an ankle,
Yep.
and all that stuff. So yeah, I think staying in the lane, nevertheless, like creatine, some whey protein powder, probably gonna be okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like we're not doing anything too crazy here.
Exactly.
So I love that. Yeah. Anything else you kind of want to share with the group, man? I mean, I really appreciate all the time you took, and this is an awesome session. So
No, man. Again, I just really appreciate everybody taking time out of their, for us, it's evening here on the East
yeah,
Coast, but
yeah,
afternoon, I know it's a little different in time of when these webinars usually have been. So I appreciate certainly you,
yeah,
Cooper
man,
Bridge, and everybody that's listening and watching,
yeah,
for, just taking your time out and being willing to
yeah,
hear me out.
of
I
course,
appreciate especially you letting me share, all of this stuff. These things are really fun and exciting. I know like it's a weird time in my career, man, because I'm always excited to talk strength and conditioning, but it's like this
yeah.
thing that's like I'm so
You're
eager
like
to
ahead of
get.
school too, though,
You know what
man.
I mean?
Like
Like
it's
I'm
yeah, yeah,
so like excited for that stuff. So I appreciate you still giving me a space from a strength and conditioning standpoint, and everybody
yeah,
hearing me out, and
yeah,
sharing about my family is greatly apprecited. If anybody, social media, Instagram for the most part is my easiest point of contact. Coach_Garrish,
yeah.
Garrish, and I'm happy if anybody has any questions off air or wants to just connect. I would love to because
Yeah.
Again, I'm
Well, I
really
think, yeah, we can all stand to learn a lot about life, business, training from you. So I think you're like a real master of building community, and your social media is evidence of that. What you're doing with, the schools, evidence of that. So just, yeah, really, really grateful, man. And yeah, we'll end it here, but thank you so much for being here, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
thank you so
All right.
much.
Later, y'all. Have a good one. Have a good night. See ya. Happy Thanksgiving.